First question what we need to ask is like, okay, we want to identify the high quality stocks, and for identifying the quality stocks, we have to we have to do some fundamental analysis. And some of us are like technical traders, and when we keep hearing like technical trading is all like you don't need fundamental analysis. So let's see like if that statement is true. People who teach technical analysis only, they don't give anything to the fundamental analysis, so, any importance to that one. And yes, mathematically patterns do repeat themselves. Yes, technical analysis helps you to find opportunities. So technical analysis helps you to find good entry points and good exit points. All that is good. Like I'm not debating that one, but I'm debating whether we do need to do fundamental analysis at all in combination with the technical analysis, and can we add fundamental analysis to our mechanical trading process, like a rule-based trading process, which is more of a technical base, right? So that's the question like first we need to answer before we spend the whole day on fundamental analysis and identifying the quality stocks, right? So I was also under the same impression that fundamental analysis is not that important. But when you look at this annual EPS growth, right? I mean, this is a nice chart for Apple. Like back in '97, they were not making money, not much money, and Steve Jobs came back to the organization. He was brought back by the board as a CEO, and after that, the innovation cycle started. And pretty much like the first few products, iPod came in 2005, 2007 timeframe. And then the iPhone released in 2009, 2010. Don't quote me the exact timing on the exact years on the dates, but roughly at the same time, right? So we all know like iPhone is a major contributor for the Apple revenue growth, and so as like profitability growth, right? So if you look at this chart, this is an EPS chart. So EPS is a earnings per share, which is net profits divided by the outstanding number of shares. So for each share, last year, 2019, Apple says, Apple is making around $12 for every share. Of course, there are 4.5 billion shares. So their profit is very good, a nice profit. So if you look at the trend also, like trend says like, the profits are growing at a very good pace. But between 18 and 19, they didn't grow much. But it's not of a bad when you look at a 5-year or a 10-year trend, right? So the question is like, okay, is Apple a good growth stock? And if you can use the chat box and type in yes or no, we'll see how many will come up. Yeah, there are a few S's, few OKs. Is the sky blue? Is it says no? Growing but slower, no revenue growth. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, pretty much like I didn't see anything negative about. Not much of a negative, except like doubt being raised, right? Usually, like if you look at the business cycle or a product cycle, right? So let's understand like how it works and in the entire world, right? There's a lot of money put into the research and development by the companies to identify something very useful, which is unique and which doesn't exist in the market at the moment. That way, they get into the market into a monopoly zone. And after a few years, sometimes it is 1 year, sometimes it's 2 years, sometimes it is 8-9 years. And luckily, Amazon is one company which got almost about 6-7 years of monopoly time. That's one of the reasons why like Amazon has grown to such an extent and at a high growth pace. But usually, like companies are not that lucky. Maximum they would get about 2-year monopoly. and after that, like they will start seeing a first competitors. Likewise, like if you look at iPhone, right? A couple of years later, like Samsung came up with a more or less similar features, but at the same cost, or at a similar cost. And a couple of years later, and when they went into a mass production and things like that, right? The competitors are huge. There are a lot of Chinese smartphone makers, and of course other I mean, not only Chinese, like the Asian smartphone makers, Asian companies. Their labor cost is cheap, their design cost is cheap, and a lot of things are cheaper from a labor cost standpoint in Asia compared to Europe versus Americas. So because of that, they are able to spin up the similar product, or using all the features, or a little bit more advanced. Like in some countries, I would say there are a dual SIM card, which is probably not heard in America, and then not and Europe is it's not uncommon. Like a dual SIM card is a necessity of Europe, because if you are switching countries, people would have like different SIM cards to use local to escape this roaming rates and things like that, right? That was a necessity. So since US is all one contiguous country, and we didn't have that necessity or a market need of a two SIM card model. Right? So a little bit more added features. So when it goes into the maturity stage, the innovating form dies down. Like there is so much you can do for the innovative product. After that, like there's no use of adding more features to that at a point where consumer is willing to pay, right? So the innovating form naturally goes into a decline mode. So and likewise, we have seen I have iPhone 11. I used iPhone 8. I didn't see much of a huge differences between iPhone 8 and iPhone 11. But there's a lot of differences between iPhone 6 and iPhone 8, right? So that's natural. There's nothing wrong in it. But the thing is, Apple, when it started in 2005, 2007 timeframe, when Steve Jobs came back in 2000s, and it took about a couple of years for him to come up with a broad roadmap, a business roadmap, which will give almost a 10-year, 15-year run. And he was, I would say, it is a good run for Apple, and unfortunately we lost Steve Jobs, and I mean it is a bad news for all the technology, and it is a loss for the entire a lot of people who want to use adopt technology in their lifestyle as well. Like we don't know what other new products Steve would have come up, Steve and his team would have come up if he was alive, right? So in 2011, after his demise, so the roadmap existed up until 2014. You can see that starting from 2011, the revenue growth started falling back, right, in Apple. So on the right side, on the left side, you are seeing the revenue growth, and if you look at this revenue growth, it's not growing, right? I mean, Bob did mention, and one other person, that revenue is not growing, right? That's true. The revenue is not growing at the rate what it was growing, right? But if you look at the profitability EPS chart, the profits are growing. Even though when revenues are not coming, the profits are growing. Nothing wrong. A lot of companies maximize the profits, even though they're not their top line is not growing, right? There's several factors that will help to do that. One factor is reduction in cost, and increase in prices, and probably a combination of both. And Apple did increase the prices of the phones, and without adding much features. So thereby they reduce the cost as well as they increase the prices. That's one way they are compensating the revenue loss or not being innovative in the recent times. And also coming up with a cheaper phone in the Asia markets, like I said, losing market share in the competitive space over there in Asia, and where the population, when you compare to entire continents, Asia almost has around 50-60% of the world population. but Apple market share is very low. So to capture that, they are coming up with this low-cost iPhone SE, but too late. They should have done the same thing like about 4 or 5 years back, not today. So I'm not sure how much they will be able to capture the market with the new pricing structure, right? They are also doing one other thing. Like if you look at these outstanding shares, right? In '97 there were almost around 3.5 billion shares, and always one good news with the public companies, one flexibility they always have. When they need money, it's pretty easy to raise money when I compare to the private firm, or you have to go to a banker, or you have to go to a private equity investor, and you have to do the same job as what the difficulty was on the day one, right? Selling your idea. So you have to keep selling your idea and showing the numbers. It's not easy to raise money like when you're not public. When you are public, there are 2-3 different ways that you can raise money. Like when you need money for furthermore research or furthermore investments into your company or expansion into the company, you can either issue bonds, and that's exactly what Apple did last week. They issued another 8 billion bonds that are expiring around 10 to 30 years because the interest rates are low, and they take advantage of low interest rate. They issued that one because Apple is a very strong company, very profitable company. People don't mind investing in Apple bonds because they have a consistent growth rate, and it's very unlikely that Apple is going to default on them, right? They're not in a financial difficulty stage. So they're going to likely continue to be like that and start growing their revenue as well, right? And so that hope is always there for all of us. Right? So that issuing bonds is one way of raising money. The other way of raising money is to issue more number of shares. Of course, they are diluting their percentage of ownership in the company from a founders and owners and the existing shareholders perspective. But as long as you are able to generate more revenue and you are able to grow the company revenue at a pace like where you are that outpaces the dilution percentage, it's not bad. So in '97 onwards, if I take a look at when Steve Jobs came back, and he started issuing the more number of shares and raising more money that's needed for the R&D and for the building the newer products, right? So up until 2011, it was okay. And 2011 onwards, if you see the trend is coming back down. So they are buying back their own shares, right? So one of the things that we don't see it very obviously is how CEOs are compensated. Of course, CEOs are compensated based on the revenue growth, but more importantly, more than the revenue growth, they are more compensated on the EPS growth. This is the right side chart is what they would be compensated against. So if you look at any annual report, they will explain how their executives are compensated. So very commonly you'll see their executives are compensated on the certain percentage of the EPS growth, and there's another thing called total shareholder return. So total shareholder return means for every shareholder, how many dollars that you have given back to the shareholders. So the CEO is working for the shareholders, right? There's no debate on that one. But at the same time, the CEO has a responsibility to deliver value to the consumer or value to his or her customers, right? So what is like the value, the product and the service, what they are doing, that is one way of delivering to the consumer market. But to the shareholders, another way of giving back money to the shareholders is dividends. And Apple dividends are very small percentage in terms of the Apple stock price. To buy a $300 stock, you are getting a $2.82, which is less than about 1% of a dividend, right? Not a huge dividend, but overall annually they are spending around $14 billion. So from $1 billion, even though they are spending that much, but they are distributing that to 4.5 billion shares, right? So that's how they came up. I mean, it's roughly around $2.82 dividend right now. Like last earnings period, they increased another round, like maybe $1 billion. The increase of in dividends. The second way of returning to the shareholders is when they buy back these shares. There are 2-3 different ways that they can buy back. They can go to the open market and buy back, or they can ask like existing shareholders who are willing to give away the stock for a certain price. So nowadays a lot of companies are following like buying from the open market, but there are 2 different ways. So by buying back reducing the number of shares, they are increasing your percentage of ownership. Thereby, you're grabbing more percentage of profit per share basis, right? That's how they say they are returning that value to the shareholders. At the same time, if you look at one more dimension, when you need innovation, you need people around you to think differently and to start coming up with new ideas, right? So when Steve Jobs was there, share-based compensation was pretty low. Like it was less than $1 billion that they are spending to compensate employees who come up with the better ideas and who run the newer units, and compensating with shares was very less compared to what they are doing right now. As you can see, I mean, almost like from 2012 to 2019, it's almost nearly around 4 times, slightly more than 4 times, right? So they are trying to. I mean, there's also one more reason like why the share-based compensation is advantage to the companies. Not only like the talent retention, but there is also a tax deduction that they can take for the share-based compensation, because usually when companies are issuing shares, it doesn't cost anything to them except a ownership dilution to the existing shareholders. But from a real cost standpoint, real cash standpoint, it is not going to cost them much. So when they compensate employees with shares, they would say from a taxation standpoint, they would have to mimic the same, like they bought the stock from the market at the market value price, and that's exactly what they can take the cost out of that tax equation. So in a way, like I mean, this is definitely not a class to explain the accounting, and I'm not an accountant to explain it properly as well. But definitely, what I can say, like share-based compensation not only gives them an opportunity to attract more talent and a better talent, which is needed for innovation and effective execution of the company, but at the same time, there is a tax benefit that they can take as well, like by doing this one. So if you look back that buybacks numbers, I mean, if I excluded that buyback number, and I said, okay, I will assume that from 2014, 2013, that's when they started more buybacks. Apple started more buybacks. If I said, okay, Apple is not doing much on the buybacks, what would have been the EPS? What would be modified EPS? So here you can see the blue one is the existing one, what is being declared publicly, and this is the public story, and the EPS chart, what you have seen, a nice growth rate. So if you look at 2013, they were making around little over $6 as an EPS, and today they are right around a little over $8. So only a $2 increase in EPS per share from last 6-7 years, right? Versus in the real market story, you are seeing like there is a 200% growth in the EPS from a 2006 to 2010, 11 to right now, 2019. So if you look at this chart, the revenue growth and the modified EPS chart, are these somewhat in line? You can use your chart to say that one. Are these the modified one? The modified one is in line with the revenue growth, what you are seeing. Yeah, right. So they are a little bit more in line. The revenue growth of reduction here and the modified EPS, right? Of course, one other dimension what we need to look at is, I mean, Trump was elected with the promise of reducing corporate tax, and the corporate tax is going to help save money for the companies, not only for the current profits, for the future profits as well. And number two is like a lot of our U.S. companies have a lot of cash holdings. They are holding it outside because when the markets got expanded in 2000, the markets, a lot of worldwide markets became global markets. So thereby opening doors for U.S. companies to go and sell products very easily outside of U.S. as well, which definitely is a good revenue growth opportunities as well as good margin growth opportunities for U.S. companies as well. So, but at the same time, the corporate tax was not modified for bringing outside money, and the tax rate in outside countries somewhat lower than the U.S. country, and it also said like we don't care about whether you paid outside tax or not. There is no deduction for the outside tax for a corporate. As an individual, there is a deduction. There is no dual taxation in America, but as a corporate, you have to pay the tax again if you want to bring back that money into America. That had driven a lot of lost opportunity in terms of driving manufacturing outside of US. Not only they are getting cost reduction by by outsourcing manufacturing to outside US, but at the same time they are able to utilize outside money to pay for that directly. So it is a multi-pronged opportunity for CEOs to make those decisions. So recognizing that, Trump said like if you bring outside money, you have to pay very less tax, and the idea is from a public standpoint, yeah, it's good for the public because companies will save money, and companies are going to invest more in R&D, and they will do more hiring of US employees, so more Americans will get hired. That is a giveaway from, I mean, because taxpayers' money, if corporates pay more tax, it is our money. I mean, eventually it is going to be used for every benefit of every taxpayer, right? So the taxpayers are losing money by allowing the corporates to pay less tax. At the same time, the benefit for the taxpayer is, okay, more employment opportunities, more growth in personal income, because your company is saving money, so they can pay you more, even though they are not hiring. So there's a lot of other advantages. So that was the intent. So at this moment, I would go to this Delphian system, and I would show this income statement. If you look at income statement for Apple, right? So this is the same chart like what we have seen, like in 170 billion over here and 160 billion. And so the growth was okay until here, 2015, but the growth is at a slower growth rate. They're making more money, but at a slower growth pace. So if you come back here into the tax expense, there is a line called income tax expense here. So Apple was paying around 19 billion for a 233 billion dollars, right? So if Trump did not make a tax deduction, Apple would have paid somewhere around, I mean, for a $260 billion revenue, and their operational profit, if you see, 63 billion, and this was on 233, they made around 71 billion. So also the net income, if you look at it, this is the taxable income. The net income is the taxable income, which is 53 billion, and here it is 55 billion. So roughly for the same amount, they would have paid, they should have paid the income tax expense should have been roughly around 19 billion. So here they paid last year, they paid only 10 billion, right? So they have been paying less than 19 billion since Trump came into office. So if you understand this, there is a $9 billion reduction that got added into the net income. So net, if I discount the tax deduction that they got, tax benefit they got, so this 55 billion should have been roughly around 45 to 46 billion. And if I divide this 46 billion divided by this 4.62 billion, then definitely it would have been another $2 or $3 less than 11.97, right? So that would take down to around 8.97 or 9.97, roughly 9.97 probably. So if I look back to this modified chart, if I add back that $10 billion, if I don't exclude the $10 billion, then what would have been this line? This modified line would have been much more at around $6 to $7 range. Do you all agree and understood that one? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, but for the argument's sake, like, okay, every company got the same benefit, and probably they would have increased their employees, and probably they would have used that money in terms of research. So, but the federal benefit, I did not do this in this chart. But in reality, what they did was they increased the buybacks. I mean, they increased the buybacks. Let's go back and look at the buyback shares. So they are using around 75 to around 50 to 100 billion dollars in terms of buyback charts, buyback money. So they increase the money that they're using to buy back the chart. So that is a primary reason why we have to pay attention to the fundamental grades, fundamental quality model also.